Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Luke, and today Aaron is going to be doing a short presentation on a new Hearthstone set that was spoiled. He's been religiously following Hearthstone for 5 years now, and if you would want to follow him for more insight into Hearthstone, his Twitter handle is to our screen right. But I'll kick it off to Aaron.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, and be sure to follow Luke on the True Believer on YouTube. Thanks. Yeah, so let's jump into it. We have a high quality PowerPoint here for you guys today, going over the first 16 cards that were spoiled in the Hearthstone reveal stream on July 2nd. New set is called United in StormWind. Here's the YouTube channel and my Twitter. So let's jump into it. Neutral cards first. Spice Bread Baker. So the bookends to me on how good this card is Earthen Ring Farseer, which, mediocre card, restores 3 health. And then you got Antique Healbot on the high end that restores 8 health. Very good card. The Healbot is still sees play in Wild somewhat. So, obviously the Bread Baker depends on how big your hand size is. Well, for a lot of control decks, your hand size is going to be pretty good. So, Warlock, Priest, Warrior control decks. And I'd even go so far as to say like some Rogue, kind of like the Miracle Rogue deck or other combo decks in Rogue. For combo, it just fills a role. For control, it serves a very distinct purpose. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Mailbox Dancer. Some cards to compare it to. Booty Bay Bookie. That card never saw any play, as we know. Giving your opponent's coins is not ideal. Getting a coin yourself on Battlecry is good. The Death Rattle, of course, is terrible. This card is much worse than Tomb Pillager. Pillager was, a curve play, very aggressive, that if your opponent ever dealt with it, you get the reward. Whereas Mailbox Dancer is, you want it to live for as long as possible so they don't get the coin. And you can do things like Shaman to evolve it or bounce it back to your hand in Rogue, something like that. But that's not great just to get a coin. So 2 out of 5 on this one. Impatient Shopkeep. So this card, it's not flashy or great or anything, but I think it's decent enough. You compare it to Rabid Worgen back in the day when Rush first came out. That card saw a little bit of play. Compared to Redgill Razorjaw of today, that card sees no play. The flexibility that Shopkeep gives with tradable, of course, helps a lot to make the card more flexible. And I could see some decks wanting this where, you trade into their 2-drop and you're left with a 3-1 body, something like that. The problem with tradable, as we'll see with some other cards, is it's great to trade it in early, but it means that at some point the card's in your deck. So if you're going to a fatigue game, you have to play this at some point. And that could be a detriment to some decks. So 2 out of 5. Rustrot Viper. This card is great. I would go so far as to say it's perhaps the best weapon removal ever, except, you think about niche cards like Harrison that draws you cards on a 5-drop that you have to cast, something like that. With this, it's basically a complete improvement over Swamp Ooze. The flexibility of tradable is just great. And I would argue that a lot of times you'd rather have a Spider Tank than a Razorfen Raptor as the fail state. So the only problem with this card is that, you're giving up some utility on your 3 spot. Yes, you're hedging for against weapons, but, let's say you compare this to Mancrick or Sunwell Initiate, those spider tanks have upside to them, whereas this has flexibility and utility. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. I think it'll see a lot of play. People play Swamp Ooze. This has much more reason to run than Swamp Ooze. Pandaren Importer. As far as being a 2-drop, I would compare this to Wandmaker. I would argue that some classes would prefer to have Pandaren over Wandmaker. Thinking like Warlock, so you might be able to discover a solid hard removal that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access off your Wandmaker. I think Wandmaker is better in some classes like Rogue and Priest. Pandaren would be better in, let's say, Druid, maybe Shaman, Warlock, that type of thing. So it's an interesting card, certainly a unique effect. As far as, comparing it to Scorpid, Scorpid's just far better than Importer, so I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5. Peasant. I tweeted about this card. I think this guy is actually a big sleeper. Yes, it has 1 health, and it dies to everything, and it has to live to your next turn. Those are some big asks. But you compare it to something like Voracious Reader, right? Reader was very good at 2 mana, as we all know, and it sucks that it got nerfed to 3, and it's seen much less play. Peasant, you play a turn 1, you're pretty set. They essentially have to answer it immediately, and which is difficult for a lot of decks to do on turn 1 to kill your 1-drop. Even if this draws 1 card, you're really happy with that. I showed some cards that it compares to. Nat Pagle, this card is much better than Nat Pagle. The card draw is guaranteed, and the body and cost is all better. People are comparing it to the Caravans. I think there's a big difference between a 1-drop and a 2-drop, living till your next turn. The body on Peasant works better, that type of thing. Between Peasant and Meeting Stone, I know I'm going to be trying a lot of aggro decks that run value-generated 1-drops, and I'm pretty excited for it. I already have used Meeting Stone to not amazing, but pretty good effect. So I'm giving this guy a 4 out of 5. Flightmaster Dungar, a dumpster is about the closest card I could figure out for this. Just kidding. I mean, this guy's cool. He has a unique effect, and the whole, Blizzard leaning into Dormant and new abilities, that type of thing is pretty fun. But so far, I've not been impressed with this guy. His effect, just coming down several turns later for the more powerful options, just really is kind of underwhelming. And it's hard to plan that far into the game from where you're at. I'm not very impressed with this guy so far. And it's one of those cards that I doubt there's much synergy being printed for it. It's more kind of a standalone, neat effect that to me hasn't been very impressive so far. 1 out of 5. Okay, now jumping into class cards. Sorcerer's Gambit. So I looked at what bevy of spells Mage has choices as far as right now, and it is a pretty good split between Fire, Frost, and Arcane. Like, they do have a pretty even split of good cards that are already run. The payoff of drawing a card and then discovering one, I mean, that's basically like an Arcane Intellect. So you're getting a 3-mana effect for 1 with the later upside of the final reward from fulfilling this. So definitely interesting. You think about the spell damage plus 3 effect. That's obviously very powerful. It's just at that point in the game, how much cards do you have left in your deck that deal damage? So this card is very cool. I think it has some potential. I don't think it's going to be flat out amazing though. But we'll see. 3 out of 5. Fire Sale. I think this card's great. It's much better than Volcanic Potion. Yes, it's a turn slower, which can be to its detriment, but you have things like Combustion, that type of thing, to fill in on your 3 AoE spell. This card's much better than Hellfire, in my opinion. Having tradable is just great and not damaging yourself. Obviously, that's Warlock, this is Mage, but still, I think Fire Sale's great. Contrary to the Shopkeep problem, this is fine to draw later in the game. Whereas Shopkeep's going to deal 3 damage to 1 minion. At some point in pretty much every game, dealing 3 damage to the board is a great effect to have. Fire Sale's very good. Demon Seed. Again, hard to evaluate. Undoubtedly, there's going to be a lot of support printed in this set for this card. Total, you have to deal 21 damage to yourself, but you heal 6 of it back, and Warlock has a lot of self-healing built into taking damage and stuff. So I think this card's actually pretty good. And the final quest reward is good. One thing I was looking at with this, it deals 6 damage to the opponent just passively throughout the game. Yes, it takes up your turn 1 or a later turn, it takes up a mana. But just dealing 6 damage passively to the opponent is pretty good. Like, heck, Dark Glare and Wild might even want that effect, just to hit them for 6, I don't know. We'll see. 3 out of 5. Rune Mithril Rod, very hard to evaluate. Yes, of course, getting Thorasand ticks on your hand is very appealing in some decks. It just depends whether the rest of the support is there. So 2 out of 5 for now. Hard to evaluate. Prismatic Jewel Kit. Again, hard to evaluate. I was thinking through the dream scenario that people were looking at with this in standard, right? You have to have the Buckler, which has 3 durability. So you have to have that on pretty much the ideal Death Rattle count, or just play this to kill the Buckler. You have to have 3 minions on the board, ideally that can attack right away. You trade into stuff on their board immediately, and then you give your hopefully large hand of minions all +3/+3. That's a lot to ask. That's a lot of setup. The payoff's pretty high, but the investment into doing that's pretty high. So hard to evaluate. Again, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 because it definitely has Elec Mount. Well, of course, the comparison is to Spike Ridge Steed, which was great in Paladin, as we all know. That just flat out, wins certain games, certain matchups. Elec Mount, I don't think you're ever putting this in your deck. You might put in 1 copy if you're running Azoth, so you get a big taunty beast back. Otherwise, this is just going to be generated from created by, and it's going to be really frustrating and stuff. So as far as like deck construction, this gets a 1 out of 5. As far as tilting in certain game scenarios, Dark Bishop Benedictus. So I looked at the current spells available to Priest. About half of them are Shadow. I think the rest are all Holy or, have no assignment. And most of them are pretty decent. You have the Shadow Clone thing that costs 7 that clears their board. You have Hysteria. You have Raised Dead, a few things like that. So obviously, if you run this and you trigger it, your deck is going to shift from healing to damage and destroying minions, more focus. So your healing would have to come from your minions, kind of like the Bread Baker or some other healing cards in Standard. So I think this guy will be pretty good. Just being able to essentially have upgraded mage hero power from turn 1 is pretty solid. So I'm going to give him a 4 out of 5. Heavy Plate. I don't think this card's good. It has the tradable problem that Shopkeep does, where sure you can trade it in, but at some point you're going to have to play 3 mana gain 8 armor, which is just passive. It's not winning you the game. I'd say it's much more like Ironhide than Shield Block. Shield Block protects you and progresses your game plan, whereas Heavy Plate does one or the other, which is a big detriment compared to Shield Block. So I'm giving this a 1 out of 5. And finally, Ramming Mount. I think the direct comparison for me here is Ace Hunter Kreen. With Kreen, you get a 2/4 of stats. With Ramming Mount, you get 2/2 added on to an existing minion, and then you get the ram when it dies. I think this card's actually quite good. I've heard some other takes on it that it's not what Hunter's looking to do, that type of thing. But I think more of a mid-rangey Hunter deck that's, looking to build on beast synergy or holding the board, that type of thing, and getting in your damage a little bit later in the game. I think this card really accomplishes that quite well. Think even playing this on something like a 3/3, that lets you clear a pretty big minion and retain your 5/5 with a good death rattle. So, Kreen is arguably better in Demon Hunter than Hunter, but I would say Ramming Mount's probably better in Hunter than Kreen is, just because you're not as likely to have a large board stick, that type of thing. And Ramming Mount just needs 1 minion to be effective, not even really that big of a minion. So I'm giving Ramming Mount 3 out of 5. Those are all the cards that have been spoiled for now. So yeah, United and StormWind comes out on August 3rd, I believe. It's going to be the second X-Back in the Year of the Griffin. And really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, shake up the meta.
So this has been your host, Luke. Thank you, Aaron, for coming on and sharing your perspective on the cards that have been spoiled for Hearthstone so far. Once again, follow him on Twitter at his handle. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe for more, and I hope you guys have a great day, and thanks for watching.